It's time for part 2 of the Overwatch players benefiting the most from OWL ending. I said I'd do a part 2 of this, so here we go. Korea, I mostly focused in on the previous episode, literally at the beginning of the season, so let's give some love to the rest of the main regions this time. And player number 1 who's benefiting from Overwatch League ending has gotta be Quartz. Not that this guy wasn't already having a very successful career. He was on a EU Contenders Dynasty in Twisted Minds. He won World Cup as well, but he was never able to be a consistent staple in the scene, always limited to some of the lesser tournaments, if you will. He could have had an opportunity in the Overwatch League late, but he didn't want to join, and for good reason. At the time, it was better off for him to be on Twisted Minds. But overall, it felt like we were missing out on this guy. A lot of the audience, if you will, wasn't able to watch this guy on a consistent basis and know about his talents. But now that Overwatch League is over and OWCS is the main thing, there's been a lot more eyes on him, and he's truly been getting the respect he deserves as one of the best players in the entire world. Consistently from start to finish, even when there are ups and downs for Twisted Minds, this guy was very clearly one of the best players in EU, and there is a great argument that can be made he was the MVP of this region. He has been that dominant. He has been that consistent. He has made that much of an impact on the game. He is a true superstar through and out, and I'm glad he's getting more of the love he deserves now that Overwatch League is gone. On the topic of Twisted Minds players, or I guess former in this situation, KSA is definitely another guy who has benefited from OWCS coming around. Honestly, KSA was one of those guys when OWL was a thing where a bunch of people were hoping he would get a second chance in the league after his first stint on the Vancouver Titans, who were absolutely terrible that year, who just panic signed a brand new roster mid-season because of the Korean revolt that went on. He never got another chance after that, despite holding his own at times while playing on ping on an absolutely terrible team. Instead, he grinded his way through Twisted Minds and was on one of the most dominant teams we've seen in recent memory. And while that has definitely worked out for him, again, in a similar light to Quartz, not always getting the love and respect he deserved outside of like World Cup, let's say, and for the hardcore fans who actually watched contenders on a consistent basis. Now here in OWCS, he's getting even more of that love, even more people backing him, saying he's one of the top players this game has to offer, and we've seen him win tournaments on multiple teams, that being TM and SSG. It doesn't really get much better than that. He's clearly one of the best tanks in Europe, without a doubt, and I'm really happy for the guy. For a quick one, while we're on the topic of EU, I'd say that Kevster is another guy who has kind of benefited from OWCS coming around. It's not to say that Overwatch League wasn't a great success for him, obviously it was, but towards the tail end, things weren't looking so great. That last season on LA Gladiators, not so good. Now, if OWL was extended for another year, maybe he could have left Glads and went to a different team, but that's all what ifs at the end of the day. Now here on Ends, he is one of the mainstay playmakers in all of the world. He's back to being a top tier player on a really competitive team. Ends has been great this entire season. There's been ups and downs, but they went to every single stage final. That's a major improvement compared to being on that disastrous Gladiators team that imploded mid-season. I'm sure he's feeling a lot better now that his talents are not being put to waste. Let's shift gears for a bit and go from EU to some of the NA players, and a great place to start is generally with most of the NRG Shock roster and some of their former players as well. We're talking Infected, we're talking Rack Attack, PGE, Tree, I'd say Kellen, and maybe even Ultraviolet you have to throw in there as well. I think this entire group is benefiting collectively, and they all have their reasons. Starting with Rack Attack, I mean, to put it simply, he got to escape the pain of playing on the Vegas Eternal. He didn't win a single game in his Overwatch League career, and there was no guarantee if OWL extended to another season that he'd join a different team if the Eternal did not bring him back for another season, or I guess if he wanted to stay on that absolutely terrible roster. But now here in OWCS, he's gotten a second chance at life. And not only that, but in a huge way by being one of the only players out there in NA to be backed by a true bona fide org with major respect like NRG Shock. And he's been winning games consistently. I mean, they upset Toronto, they've been to stage finals. That's a pretty big step up compared to playing on a team that couldn't even come close to sniffing a victory in the past. Rack Attack is living his best life right now, and for all of us who felt terrible for him in OWL, It's really great to see. As for a person like PGE, he kind of benefits in a couple of ways. I mean, first and foremost, there's probably never a chance he'd get to play in Overwatch League despite having the talent to do so, and now he gets to be on one of the most relevant North American teams while making key plays over and over again. Even though there's been some downs and stuff and he's been memed on, you can't deny he's had some very clutch moments on the hit scan. But it goes beyond just that. In general, he's kind of winning in life with Overwatch League ending. Because of the rise of OWCS and him being on such a relevant team, he's gained like a cult-like following, I guess you could say, for the lack of a better word. I mean, thousands upon thousands of people tune into his Twitch streams every time he hits the live button. That's pretty big. He's gotten a lot of recognition from being in OWCS. So not only can he be successful from a competitive standpoint, but also in ensuring financial stability, and it really doesn't get much better than that. Then I think we can kind of put Tree and Infected in a similar situation as players benefiting from Overwatch League ending. Infected's technically not on NRG anymore, but it means all the same. Essentially, both of these guys were just too young to play in the Overwatch League. They can't control when they're bored, you know? They always have the talent to be relevant and to be good contributors on a good team, but they weren't old enough to play in OWL. They couldn't flex their talents as some of the best players that North America had to offer. And Contender simply wasn't getting the same amount of love or support. Now more people get to know about their names, and they can see firsthand why they're respected so much by the true Overwatch esports enthusiast out there. These guys mean business. They can play great even against some of the best players in the entire world. And now here in OWCS, they're basically at the forefront of things. They are stars of their region, and it's great to see that after all these years of simply watching them bide their time. And just to throw one other NRG guy out there, definitely have to bring up Kellen's name here when it comes to who benefits in OWCS. Not to say that he hasn't been able to have a good career. He played well in Contenders Korea back in the day. He got an Overwatch League contract for a couple of years, but you can't deny that a lot of the time in recent years, his skill set hasn't translated to any wins whatsoever. It's been a struggle playing on NYXL. You think about 2022, that team was absolutely horrid. He had to pick up a bunch of new heroes he wasn't familiar with. Then the next year, 2023, it was okay, but New York were just mid. They were never going to compete. But now here on NRG, he has that chance. He can flex his talents that we always knew he had. He was one of the best tank prospects out there way back in the day when he joined OWL, thanks to the amazing play we saw on Talon. And now it's actually looking like it means something. It's not going to waste here on NRG. He's found a home. It took a bit in OWCS for a bit, but at least for this year, we can say that NRG's supporting him properly, despite him having to play on high ping. He's been able to make the most of it, have some good performances, dominate Toronto Defiant even one time. Things are looking good for him. It's finally on the up after a very long time of trying to find the right place. Pivoting back to EU, Sana is another guy who's definitely been pretty happy since Overwatch League ended, I'd say. He's found a lot of success. I mean, there was the whole Team Finland run that we saw in World Cup, but now here in OWCS, on Virtus Pro, despite coming up short, he showed that he can be a superstar playmaker, actually getting playtime instead of riding the bench like we saw in London Spitfire and Florida Mayhem. That really sucked for him. His only time in the Overwatch League was completely irrelevant, but now here in OWCS, he's been a mainstay starter. He's seen as one of the best DPS players in all of his region, and I think that's a pretty big step up. This year didn't end how he wanted to, for sure, but it's a building block, and you never know what might happen next year as teams change and as he continues to improve. And in a similar light, I'd also like to throw in Psycho, another guy who didn't have much relevance in the Overwatch League. Things were certainly on the up for 2023 when he was on NYXL, but again, just like with Kellen, it's not like it translated into a lot of results. Now Psycho is not just earning the respect that he deserves, but he's winning big time as a part of SSG. Recently hasn't played as much, but you can't deny he's made some excellent contributions for this team. If you look at Stage 2, for example, when SSG won, think about how great he was playing on Tracer, going head-to-head with Kevster, even outplaying him at times. That's pretty big for a guy who had no real prior achievements. This guy is winning big time in OWCS. Not only is he on one of the best teams, but he looks like one of the better players at his position himself. And just to throw one other EU name out there, well, I guess in terms of people competing in the EU region, I gotta go with alexyOWL. This is a guy who I pretty much had never even heard of before OWCS started, but he found his way on Team Peps. Then, they were freaking called Gaming Gladiators, and now Piece of Cake. Doesn't really matter what you want to call them. Regardless, he's made a name for himself, and he was even, like the Stage 2 MVP, or whatever you want to call it. That's pretty impressive. This guy was young and was just trying to find his footing, and suddenly he was seen as a reliable playmaker on one of the more relevant EU teams. This was a really good start to his career. I mean, beforehand, again, there really wasn't much going for him, and the kid is only 17, turning 18 at the end of December. He's still in his prime. There's still room for him to continue improving. This was one of the main appeals of OWCS becoming a thing, right? Having all of these players who no one really knew about, who are young, who are looking for the kickstarts of their careers, actually getting that opportunity now that it's more of an open ecosystem. I mean, this guy has only been competing competitively since 2023. Summer 2023, by the way. It's only the beginning of his career, and under the right circumstances, we could see his stonks absolutely skyrocket. Back into NA, a player that definitely deserves to be in the conversation here is Sugarfree. It may seem a little silly because he's always been popular, he's always been seen as a good player, but at the end of the day, he only got one season in Overwatch League when he deserved so much more. He got to play one measly season on just an okay Vancouver Titans team where he was clearly a young star. Now here in OWCS though, we're seeing a very different story where he not only gets to flex the true potential he has, but he gets to play on a really good team with an org backing him and giving him a livable wage. Something this dude has deserved for so long, but he was unfortunately held back by that strict age limitation held by the Overwatch League. Sugarfree is an absolute superstar over there in North America, and even when the lights are at their brightest, we see him competing against the best of the best. He's participated in World Cup. We saw him go to the Esports World Cup over the summer. Finally, Sugarfree is getting everything he deserved after having to sit there for so long while watching all of his friends. And you know what, while I'm at it, I might as well bring up Vega on that light as well. Another guy who for a while just wasn't old enough to play, his name wasn't well known enough in some of the middle to late years of the Overwatch League, but now he gets his opportunity on Toronto to show off as one of the best main supports in all of this region. Now, Vega hasn't always played perfectly, he's gotten his fair share of criticisms, but at the same time, he's absolutely had a lot of bright spots as well that are worth acknowledging as well. I mean, he's had to flex onto the Illari as a main support. He's found a lot of success on that hero, looking like one of the best playmakers in all of NA on her. He's helped them win some big games, whether you like it or not. And at the end of the day, he's finally here, finally on a relevant team. He got robbed of that in Overwatch League 2023. He was supposed to sign, I think it was with the Shock, I don't remember all the details, but then he got rule booked out of a contract, couldn't play, got denied of that glory, but now here he gets his redemption here in OWCS, playing for Toronto Defiant, and I'm pretty happy for the guy. Now I'm going to bring up one that's maybe a bit more on the touchy side because he has been involved in some controversies that were discovered when he was younger, I guess. I don't know all the details, but I think Seeker is another guy who has benefited from OWCS coming around. Even though he was in Overwatch League for a handful of seasons, he was always on these teams that just weren't any good, frankly. Boston had their ups and downs with him. It wasn't all terrible, but playing for that org obviously was kind of hell, especially when they had Coach Laurie there. And then he literally in the final season of OWL played on one of the worst teams in Overwatch League history in that 2023 Valiant squad. It hasn't been great for him. Overwatch League did not treat him well. He never got to play on any great teams. And now he finds himself heading to Stockholm, Sweden as a part of Nightmare. And he got to compete in Esports World Cup and find some success there as well. That talent isn't going to waste anymore. It finally feels like there's results for all of his efforts, and that's pretty great for a guy who's just been trying to make it big for a long time now. And just to wrap up the North American region, I want to say Citrus Nation as a whole, and all their players and some of their previous ones have certainly benefited from OWCS coming around. This open format has been a huge boost for all of their careers, because beforehand, most of these guys weren't known at all. I know Lethal's technically not there anymore, but for a while he was playing there, and he was able to turn things around thanks to that, and Collegiate, and Contenders and whatnot, and you think about Tap as well and what it's meant to him, Zeb at times. It's just been a crazy underdog story to watch, and it's all possible because of OWCS being a thing with this whole open ecosystem. That would have never happened in Overwatch League, and there's a good chance it never would have even happened in like Contenders either. This gave these guys the opportunity to be successful and put their names on the map in North America as guys that you simply cannot forget about. Think about on stage 1, they were this Miracle team just kind of coming together as a squad, kind of this fringe group stage team that didn't stand much of a chance, but then by stage 2, they feel completely different. Suddenly, they're getting the best of TSM and Luminosity on a consistent basis, beating some of these staple NA teams, pushing some of the other ones to their limits. That's not something that you see often, and it's only possible because of the open ecosystem that we have now. Citrus is one of those examples of what makes OWCS what it is, and I'm glad to see all of these players on Citrus find some kind of success, and in some lights for a couple of them kind of reviving their careers. Thinking about Lethal, and I guess Tap to a certain extent as well, but definitely Lethal after how badly people made fun of him on the London Spitfire. And just to throw one other EU name out there for you, I feel like I have to bring up Vestola before this video ends. This is another guy kind of in a similar light to KSA, where he just never got that second chance in Overwatch League. And for him, it was very tragic, as Paris Eternal completely imploded. They wanted the budget roster. They didn't want to keep him despite him being a bright spot, not only in 2021, but in the short amount of time he was there in 2022 as well. He always did what he was supposed to. He was always consistent. It was clear that there was a greater limitation to what he could do on a team, but no one wanted to give him that chance. So he did naturally what a lot of other motivated individuals do. He kept working at it. He got that opportunity to play for Team Finland, which opened things up tremendously. And now he finds himself on ENCE, one of the best teams in Europe, looking like arguably the best tank in the region in certain formats. Or at the very least, he's always going to be in that top 3 to top 5 tank conversation. Vestola has made it. He's showing exactly what all of the Paris fans hoped he could become way back in the day when he joined this team in 2021. The Vestola career turnaround has been one of my favorite stories since Overwatch League has come to its end. The Vestola 180 career turnaround has been one of my favorite stories to follow since Overwatch League has ended. From World Cup up until now, he has transformed himself from this player who got wrongly released to a superstar that people cannot live without. And that essentially wraps up my list of NA and EU players that I think have benefited the most from Overwatch League coming to an end and being replaced by OWCS and some of these other open circuit tournaments. Just to bring up some honorable mentions from some other places, because again, this is all about NA and EU, I'd say you have to throw in Donghack. He looks a lot happier and better in general now that he's not on Atlanta Reign. I throw in basically all of Poker Face, just knowing the season they've had, specifically Choice A1 in recent memory though, and also all of the OWCS Japan region. They have been huge for Overwatch esports. They're on the up and coming. We're getting a new wave of support thanks to the great region of Japan and all the fans they have over there. This is only the beginning of something special over there, and I look forward to what comes next. And that's basically going to do it for me. Let me know what other players you think are benefiting from Overwatch League ending down in the comments below. There's definitely some big ones I've missed out there somewhere. And if you enjoyed this video and you want more Overwatch content just like this, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you're new. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.